Their friends used to say, can we go to Eleanor's shop? And so I had all of them. I mean, Audrey Hepburn was the cutest. She wanted a certain color binding on the bed cover.
Uh-huh.
And I said, Audrey, no good.
Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by. It's story time here at my channel, and I'm going to give you the moral of the story first. Right now. If you have a story that you think is new, true, and interesting, start it now. And if you're not a writer, write anyway, even if you only keep a journal. Print it out or write it longhand or something. Someday, 100 years from now or a couple hundred years from now, someone is going to find it and immortalize you. Also, I want to jump to the end of the story. Check out this person, Stacy Vogt. Just at least if you don't want to hear the rest of this video, or if you get bored at some point, go here at any rate and check out Stacy Vogt. She figures in the moral of this video. Anyway, my story. Some of the most enjoyable work I've ever done was working as a research assistant for a person who is a published author. It's not the best paid work I've ever done, but dang, I enjoyed it. And I got around, when I had finished this one project, of thinking, I could do this. I could write a book easily. And by the way, while we're here, if you think you can't do it, if you think it's too hard, just start with a book like this, which probably still has plenty of good advice in it. And from there, you can, you'll get more advice on the internet. But anyway, it's not as hard as it seems. But anyway, there I was, vaguely wanting to write a book and not sure where to start, what I should write about. And I asked this very literate, artistic friend of mine, what is a book that you would like to read? Think of a book you would like to read. Like, for instance, a biography of Mary Blair, this famous, very well-known Disney concept artist, Mary Blair. And she said to me, I would love to read a biography of Mary Blair if one had been written. And my jaw just about dropped. You are kidding me. There is no biography of Mary Blair. Those of you who know, for those of you who don't know, Mary Blair was this Disney concept artist who actually designed It's a Small World. And I could go on. She's insanely well known in the art world. She is the one Disney artist who is not an animator, who is known as well as animators. She's as well known as the 9 Old Men. This all might mean nothing to you, but believe me, it would if you had read my book, but I'll get to that in a minute. At the time, my artist friend told me she would like to read a biography of Mary Blair. Just about the best book on Mary Blair that was out there was a coffee table book by a guy named John Canemaker, and it was the first edition of that book was the only one that was out at the time, and it was the copies were selling for $300 on eBay. It's just this slim, volume, and yeah, $300 on eBay for used copies. So I hit the internet, the libraries, the phone. I got into some secret Disney archives in Burbank. I had a connection. And I can tell you the people there were into this project. The pixie dust out in LA in Disney Studios is thick, regardless of what's kind of happened, Plenty of them are into legacy Disneyana, and they were hot on this project. Anyway, as I was researching the story of Mary's life, mysteries always come up, and you always want to know what motivates people. What is the big driving force in their life? And I did come across a mystery. At some point in her life as a young adult, she changed her mind. She had grown up wanting to become an art teacher like her own Mrs. Bertha something, but she went to grade school and high school and college, first years of college, with a couple of people, her twin sister who had passed away and a very close friend. And I had an idea that very close friend would have known, but she would have been like literally 100 years old by the time I sat down to do this biography. And I really wanted to know why Mary had, as I say, changed at some point from wanting to be a humble art teacher to going for it big time, wanting to become a fine artist. At some point, she had started off at San Jose State with her sister and this friend, Virginia, and she left. She left San Jose State and went off to Los Angeles, the big city, to the Chouinard Institute. And her life changed there. She met the guy that she married, and she just wound up taking a whole different life. Her horizons had changed. She would go on to have a fabulous career in Hollywood and New York. What made Mary change her mind? Or did she change her mind? What was going on in her head? You look for clues in their childhood and their young adulthood. Anyway, I spent about a year going through archives and finding people, like I said, on the West Coast and the East Coast. And finally, I meandered up to the Morgan Hill Historical Society. Morgan Hill was the little town where she had grown up. And I mentioned the name of this Virginia. Yeah, would be nice if I could talk to her. And I actually got in touch with one of her younger relatives. And this person said to me, "Wow, that's too bad. You know, you just missed her. She died a couple of weeks ago at the age of 101, and she was still chipper." If you have an idea for a story, go find the people you need to talk to now. Even if they're 100 years old, go find them, go talk to them. Find their survivors, find anyone who knew them. But the source, it was just sitting. She was the one person who I felt could have helped me write a strong chapter 1 in that book. I mean, the way I was outlining that story, I was, it was something like, it was episodic. She did this, and then she did this, and then she did this, and then Mary did this. I wanted it to be something that built. Mary did this, then this happened, so then this happened, and then this. You want it to be an escalate. You want to create an arc in your story, even if it's a true story of someone's life. And I really felt that Virginia had held the key. She was a close personal friend of Mary's in her childhood and young adulthood. And I could have asked her. And not only that, but this Virginia was an interesting person in her own right. She was a girl, someone talked to me about her. She had gotten this passion as a kid for librarianship of all things. And from the time she was a kid, she talked about becoming a librarian and all these things she would do as a librarian. She was just obsessed or keenly interested in, I don't know, classifying books and reading books and storing books and making books available. And as a matter of fact, she had a decades-long career as a librarian, and she was so darned accomplished and well-known in her profession that there's a bronze plaque at the library where she finished her career with her name on it. I mean, there's that. She would have been a hellaciously interesting person to talk to. Well, anyway, I did do my research diligently for a year. I wrote a book proposal, and I snagged one of New York's biggest nonfiction agents. Yes, I did. And he couldn't sell it. Here's what happened. Halfway through my research, Disney Publishing decided to print a second edition of John Canemaker's book. So my whole pitch about, it's time for another Mary Blair book, it's time, people want Mary Blair, it didn't work with Disney Publishing. I really, really wanted to get a deal with Disney Publishing, but they said no, that would be duplicative. We're doing this second edition of John Canemaker's. So on to other publishers. These New York editors. Disney. That's a California thing. That would just be of regional interest. No, it's not of universal interest. That kind of gets me because the things they do publish, I mean, they publish this stuff that's arguably only of New York interest any day of the week. No, I'll read them out loud after all. I mean, what the heck, I'm here. This author, contributor to The New Yorker, The New York Review of Books, The New Republican, N+1. Anyway, what is it? Still in the Published City, a group biography of the New York School of Poets telling the intertwined stories of John Ashbery, Frank O'Hara, Kenneth Koch, Barbara Guest, James Schuyler, and, Amiri Baraka, I don't know. The intersections of various artistic and cultural scenes, as well as reading their influential poetry in light of politics, race, sexuality, and a rapidly changing New York. That sounds to me like something of regional interest. Here's this other project. The Fabulous Frances Farquharson, I don't know, An American in the Highlands, a biography of Harper's Bazaar's wartime fashion editor who became Lady of Invercargill. I'd like to know what the arc of her life was like. Here's another one. Lulu, Yves Saint Laurent's legendary muse, Lulu de la Falaise, and the cult of haute bohemia. She brought us an illustrated oral biography / history of one of the fashion world's most memorable icons, YSL's muse, Lulu de la Falaise, and the world she both created and lived in. And nope, I'm not bitter. It's just the way the industry is. You simply have to work with an industry as it is. I'm kind of relieved that I didn't have to write the book. And I've talked about that industry in other videos here. I have a short version and a long version. And that's not to discourage you from writing. Just get the right project. But full disclosure, the other reason that people said no thanks, and I had to agree with this, was that the arc of Mary Blair's life was tragic, but not sublimely tragic. I mean, you want an arc like this. Essentially, the big obstacle in Mary Blair's life was alcohol, which is a big obstacle, but it's a mundane one. It's not sublime. It sort of left us with, she was born, she lived, and she died, and on the way she struggled mightily because of the presence of alcohol in her life. So yeah, couldn't beat that. And to tell you the absolute truth, I was a little bit relieved at these rejections because I was so disappointed that I was not able to get Virginia's story about Mary. I mean, it was, I felt that I had a big hole in chapter 1. But just to tell you about some of the good that came of it, the people that I did manage to talk to were, I mean, I did talk to some octogenarians and nonagenarians who were fascinating raconteurs. These are people who were there on the ground level. For instance, back in the Mad Men days of New York and you know, just post-World War II, all this, just this boom of creativity and productivity, artistic and industrial. And these are people who really, I mean, really, our world looks the way it does because of the energy that they had and the freedom that they had. In fact, some of these people wished that they had written books, and they were delighted to get a phone call or a letter from across the ocean and over the waves of time decades later from some person who had found their name in a directory or whatever, or in a magazine, and they could tell some hellacious stories.
Yeah, I have lots of stories, honey.
Oh, tell me a New York story. Do you have another one?
Well, yes, but you probably won't believe me.
I'll believe you. I want to hear it.
Well, I knew, you've heard of Truman Capote.
Of course.
Truman was really one of my first best friends when I was much younger. I had just started art school. And Truman used to come over and sit with me in the afternoon, and he said, Ellie, you do that, you do that. And he used to take me to a girl's house, not an apartment, on Lexington Avenue. I remember where it was. This girl had an apartment with fire escape. Is that what they call it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
In the back, you know, and we'd sit out, and a whole group of us would meet there and get absolutely pissed in the summer on her fire escape. And she had a lot of friends, and I remember some of them. Mm-hmm. And you know who that girl was?
Who?
Holly Golightly.
It was Holly Golightly. After all the mad stories, the other stories she had told me, the people she worked with and worked for, Audrey Hepburn, Princess Grace, and all the legends of design, the founders in that era, every photographer, artist, designer, and executive in Manhattan and London and Paris that you could name. And I actually did not see that coming. Oh yeah, I was friends with Truman Capote. I want to see this girl. Okay, next story. I developed a passionate interest in a form of mental illness, a psychosis called delusional disorder, because it affected my life. There was someone in my life who suffered from it. And I was on social media talking about it. I crossed paths with someone who astonishingly had recovered from it. This is generally a lifelong illness, and it is destructive. And this person had not only recovered from it, but she had recovered from the most florid, intense form of it. Her story, her delusions were so wild, and her story of recovery was equally dramatic. I mean, this intervention that her friends had managed to stage with the cooperation of a doctor was just it was the riskiest, boldest, most inventive, crazy thing. Anyway, time passed, the person in my life stayed sick, and I kind of got an idea of going back to Stacy Votaw and asking her if she would do an interview with me on my channel, on this channel. She was up for it. However, something had happened recently. She had been given a second diagnosis of ALS. amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, aka Lou Gehrig's disease. So I kind of stepped back. We had an interview set up, but we didn't make it for some reason, and I thought probably because she was busy, doing things with this other illness. And from time to time, I would see her on YouTube demonstrating her, her adaptive techniques of using voice commands to use her tablet. And so, I could see that she had things to do. So I thought, I'll just hang out here in the background for a while. But one day she turned up on Facebook, and it was a very distressing post. So I went to see her, and this time I didn't want to just do an interview. I wanted to do a book. Her story is absolutely book-worthy, and I could also do, just a straightforward chapter on delusional disorder. And this is one of those things where, you don't like to say this, but it's a train wreck of an illness to begin with, and people watch it. And Stacy's delusions in particular were so salacious and so over the top, and she was completely frank. She was perfectly willing to talk about it. She had actually started a blog before she got her second diagnosis, and it was just all there. And when I had talked to her on the phone about interviewing, yes, sure, I'll talk about it. I will say everything. Anyway, I went to see her, and she had gone off a cliff in her illness. She can communicate, but she, either she speaks in a way that it's just really slow, really hard, really labored speech and hard to understand, or she has to type, and I mean type with her eyes, like this. She's got this console in front of her, this keyboard console, and she has to type, and it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time. That wasn't a problem for me. It was a problem for her. Here's what's going on. She said that, yes, at one time she would have done this project with me, but she was on to advocacy for ALS patients. And I tried to persuade her. I did. I mean, kind of crass, but I did try to persuade her. And I told her that this project, the mental illness project, could really put her on the map. And it could help. She could leverage that for her current advocacy, that she could use the success in the one advocacy to blow up her new advocacy. And she liked that. She said, well, maybe come back tomorrow and we'll talk about it. Well, someone got COVID. I couldn't see her the next day, but I did start to do some real heavy academic research on this topic, and God, I was getting into it. I mean, I was reading all these medical journals, and I had doctors I wanted to talk to. I had this, I'd started writing. I was loving it. Just that writery phase, just when you're just loving your topic and you're seeing your book coming, you're just seeing it. When I did finally get back to Stacy, she had made a decision. She said, I'm sorry. Yeah, she apologized to me. She she's lying there. And I said, Stacy, you're apologizing to me. But anyway, she said, if we had started this a year ago, it would have been different. And it's not that she can't do it. She can. But she has to spend her time advocating for herself now. She has a couple of productive hours a day. She doesn't have any family. She is essentially, I believe, my impression is she's a ward of the state. And she is clinging by her eyelids to this online community, which is the only, it's the only lifeline to the outside world. And it's the only way she can let people know exactly what her experiences are, what, the risks she faces. She needs to have people who know about her, and that's all she has time for. It's very time consuming for her to write these posts, these Facebook posts, and she can't use that time on another project. So yeah, there's the moral of the story again, right now. And this isn't even something that could have, changed my life, big deal. It could have changed her life. Really, if we had started earlier, she could have been in a better position now. If we had really created a much bigger community based on her experience with mental illness, she might not have to fight for her basic dignity the way she occasionally does. Or at least her fight would be more public and might benefit a lot more people. And here's one of her posts that illustrates the situation. I'm going to go ahead and read it out loud. And by the way, Stacy generally tries to be upbeat. It's not all doom and gloom and horror stories when you go to her Facebook page, but this is the sort of story that illustrates why she's got to do the things she's doing, and she cannot work with me. So, like I said, you can go read it yourself, but I'm going to just read it out loud since we're here. It should have never happened. The day finally arrived for my long-awaited appointment with the ophthalmologist. This appointment was critical to me because I had been experiencing double vision for months. For someone who communicates by typing with their eyes, it was on a scale of life or death importance. On the day of the visit, none of my regular caregivers came in. One was off, the other called out, so no one was familiar with my regular routine or my technology. When the doctor arrived, substitute caregivers, unfamiliar with my routine, were just finishing up with my bath, so my computer had been moved out of the way. The doctor came over to put drops in my eyes to dilate them for a regular eye exam for glasses. I refused. I had LASIK surgery on my eyes in preparation for my eye gaze being the way she communicates. I have 20/20 vision. I only wear simple readers to help see my computer. I had an entire summary typed up on my computer for her to review. And I knew that if she dilated my eyes, I may not be able to see and access the truly important information that I needed to share with her. When they raised me up and positioned the computer in front of me, they did it improperly, so my eyes couldn't engage to type. I kept trying to tell them to move the computer, but no one could understand me and kept telling me to type what I was trying to say. Out of frustration and fear that I would not be able to get my message across, I began to cry, making it impossible to understand anything I was trying to say. At that point, apparently, she was trying to speak, and she's really hard to understand. I looked up at the ceiling where a sign hangs above my head that says, "If I am staring at the ceiling, grab a communication board." And I've seen these things, they have letters and words on them that you use to communicate with the other person. Anyway, there are several boards around my room. Someone got one, but no one knew how to use it. Finally, one of the many people in the room figured out on one side of the board there was a list of people I could ask for. I asked for a particular person that I knew could help me with my computer. I was told they were in a meeting and couldn't be bothered. Then the one person in close proximity that could have helped me came in. By that time, the doctor had put a pair of frames without lenses on my head and had obstructed one eye with a folded-up tissue. The aide moved the computer to a more sensible position and asked if I could calibrate it. When I said no, instead of asking me why or notice the very visible lensless glasses with one eye obstructed, she got mad. She stormed out of the room declaring, "That's it! I'm out! I can't with her!" She left with me begging her to come back and help. Finally, after much chaos, drama, numerous people, and me traumatized into tears, my OC came in to save the day. Occupational, I don't know what. They correctly positioned the computer, enabled me to calibrate it, and access the summary. The doctor confirmed I had 20/20 vision and completely understood why I did not want my eyes dilated. She was able to give a proper diagnosis. This all could have been avoided if the administration had fulfilled my requests, numerous requests over months to get caregivers and nurses trained on the boards before I lost my ability to speak. And I explicitly requested that once they were trained to come and do a quick role play with me. This is because 3 times in real life I needed the board and the so-called trained caregivers administered them incorrectly, rendering me unable to communicate. Now my speech is essentially gone, and I can't help with training as I had hoped. Since the first round of training months ago, I have seen only one other person trained, and none of them has role-played with me, leaving their level of comprehension unknown until the time of need. Communication boards would not only benefit me, but other ALS, cerebral palsy, stroke victims, and other nonverbal residents in the community. When I initially requested implementation of the boards, the administration pushed back. They told me the way they communicate with the other ALS patients is by reading their facial expressions. I'm just going to take a moment out here to remind you that these are people who can barely speak, and a lot of them can't even eat, they can't swallow. They have a trach tube and a G tube, and supposedly they are communicating detailed, sophisticated needs through facial expressions. Anyway, the unsaid message to me was that this would be my future. I told them that it sounded like hell to me. It has to be a virtually impossible endeavor to get any real information of use from someone in need simply by looking at their eyes and voiceless mouths. Imagine what these poor souls would be communicating if they could. So, I wish I had started earlier with Stacy. At the log, which I've been putting on the screen here from time to time, I got back to my friend who told me she would like to read a biography of Mary Blair, and I asked her, well, what else would you like to read? What other kind of book would you like to read that hasn't been written yet? And she doesn't have any ideas right now, but if you do, let me know. Let me know in the comments.
They either weren't available, they were busy.
Uh-huh.
Keep in mind, this business used to be a very small business.
Yes.
Very tiny business.
Uh-huh.
It's huge today. Mm-hmm. But sometimes people were busy and you just couldn't get them because they were already, I'm tied up. I got a dozen jobs, I'm over here, I'm over there, I'm under contract. You couldn't get them.
It's amazing.